The Way Up to Heaven is a short story by Roald Dahl that made its debut in The New Yorker in February 1954 and was subsequently included in his collection of short stories titled Kiss Kiss, published in 1960. The narrative revolves around Mr. and Mrs. Eugene Foster, an elderly affluent couple residing in a 6-story house on East 62nd Street in New York City. Their marriage spans over 3.5 decades, during which Mrs. Foster has demonstrated unwavering devotion as a wife, catering to her husband's needs and yielding to his domineering will without protest. Dahl emphasizes that Mr. Foster's control over her has been so effective that she can't even contemplate defying him. The Fosters share their somber abode with their staff, seldom receiving guests. Their sole child, a daughter, lives in Paris with her spouse and 3 children. Despite never having met them, Mrs. Foster harbors a profound affection for her grandchildren. The dynamics of Mr. and Mrs. Foster's relationship become evident through early exposition. Mrs. Foster has an irrational fear of lateness, which Mr. Foster exploits by subjecting her to unnecessary waiting until it's too late to arrive punctually. This routine has persisted for years on special occasions, inducing anxiety in Mrs. Foster. Recently, she has started to suspect that his actions might be intentional. As the story unfolds, the Fosters are preparing for a 6-week absence. Mrs. Foster is set to fly to Paris to finally meet her grandchildren, while Mr. Foster plans to remain at his club. He has let go of all the servants temporarily to save money. He intends to periodically visit their residence for checks and mail retrieval. Mrs. Foster experiences mounting anxiety as the clock approaches 9:15 a.m., the departure time necessary for her to reach the airport in a timely manner. Her worry stems from the fear that her husband might change his mind about her trip if she misses her flight. Secretly, she longs for a life in Paris with her grandchildren. Around 9:22 a.m., Mr. Foster finally emerges, yet he again prolongs their departure by insisting on washing his hands before getting into the car. As they head to the airport, a dense fog rolls in, causing the chauffeur to slow down. Mrs. Foster's anxiety intensifies as her husband predicts her flight will be cancelled due to the weather. Her nerves cause her eye to twitch, and she realizes her husband is fully aware of his impact on her. With her flight cancelled, Mrs. Foster returns home to rest for the night before attempting to catch another flight the following day. This time, she suggests that her husband not accompany her to the airport, and he agrees, but he asks to be dropped off at the club, which is in the opposite direction from the airport. The next morning, Mr. Foster once again employs tactics to delay their departure. Eventually, they get into the car, but just as they are about to leave, Mr. Foster claims he must find a gift for their daughter, supposedly somewhere in the house. Mrs. Foster follows him inside, but realizes the front door is locked. As she fumbles with her keys, she hears sounds from within. She then abandons her husband and promptly heads to the airport without him. A transformation takes place within Mrs. Foster. She discovers newfound authority and confidence. While in Paris, she diligently writes to her husband, reminding him to care for himself in her absence. Upon returning to New York from her journey, Mrs. Foster realizes that there's no car waiting for her at the airport. Oddly, she remains surprisingly calm, even a bit content. As she arrives home, she observes the accumulated mail and detects an unfamiliar smell emanating from the house. Her curiosity piqued, she ventures to the back of the house, seemingly to validate her suspicions. She proceeds to contact the elevator repairman, mentioning that the elevator is jammed between the 2nd and 3rd floors, implying that it might be linked to her husband's unfortunate demise. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.